I'm so happy to have Karl Hunter here. Karl Hunter is in Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. In one of the bands I was with, we opened up for you guys a couple of times. I'm so glad to finally have you on the podcast.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I remember that. I think I was 2016 was the last time.
Boy, you
In
have a
Santa
better
Ana.
memory than me.
I looked it up.
Good
I've
for
been
you.
listening to gigs, and I was like, I remember Santa Ana. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, for sure. And I think also, not only Santa Ana, I think it was also House of Blues. Yeah, Anaheim, right? I think that,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. So it was probably around the same year, if not early the following year. Man, how the years just blend together.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Well, listen, Big Bad Voodoo Daddy's a huge, huge group, but I before we talk about that, I want to get into to you how you started playing music. I'm going to say, and then we'll get into like saxophone and stuff like that. So, where did you grow up? How did you get started in music?
I grew up in Goleta, California, which is like kind of the bedroom community right next to Santa Barbara.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I, from the very beginning, from the very get-go, wanted to play drums. And I still do. I play now. It's obviously not my main thing, but yeah, my dad, he played clarinet in high school back in the late 40s, and he had a clarinet, and he gave that kind of handed that over, and so that's kind of how I started on this thing. But from the very beginning, I had the pots and pans and the whole thing, and the wooden spoons, and was making all the noise. And then, why don't you play this? He gave me the clarinet, so that's how that started. And in the beginning, I started in seventh grade. We did beginning band. I wasn't that interested in it. I think a lot of kids that age, it was just something to do. And so I did it, and was in marching band and all those things. And then I got to high school. And then while in high school, I had a really, really influential director. It was just like an awesome human being. His name was Isaac Jenkins, and he's, pretty well known in the Santa Barbara area as just being this wonderful teacher. And he had this great jazz program. And at that point, my folks, my mom played a little bit of piano in church, and my dad, like I said, played clarinet in high school, but they weren't particularly musical. Like when I grew up, we kind of listened to just the kind of Muzak station that was on.
Okay.
That was about as hip as it got. But with Mr. Jenkins, like he was so into it, and he really had a lot of charisma, and he was really able to tap into what made students excited about playing. So immediately when I got to high school, I'd heard about this amazing person, and then it was all true. He was really inspiring. And so at that point, I still played clarinet. And so by my sophomore year, I was like, okay, I got to do this. I got to be in this program. So I picked up a sax that summer. He let me borrow one of his own tenors. And then I came back and I played Barry. As a lot of, getting into jazz band kids do. And I really loved it. I really took to Barry a lot. And for a while, actually, I was considering just playing Barry. That's a whole other story. But yeah, he was really great and encouraging, and he'd figure out what you liked about music, and then, oh, did you check this out? He'd send you home with records. He sent me home with Frank Zappa Live in New York. And that record totally changed my mind. Like that, it was a whole new epiphany about what music could be. And anyway, so yeah, like he would figure out what you liked, and so yeah, that's how I got into it. And I went from not being interested in music really at all, to being like 2 or 3 months into his jazz band semester my junior year, to be like, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. So it was a really big, moment of change in my life.
Huge transformation for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And going from not, it's funny because I still play clarinet. I play clarinet in Voodoo Daddy. It's one of the things I play, and I still think I play at it. I don't consider myself a real clarinet player, but I mean, I do have that background from school. And yeah, but the really thing was like getting to play a saxophone, and then that coupled with being in that program really just like was a huge moment. And then just the improvising thing, like going from clarinet to saxophone and realizing like, wait, this is so much easier. That didn't hurt.
Yeah, for sure. I'm wondering, you had said that so you took up tenor sax sophomore year, summer between sophomore year and junior year, but then you went to Barry.
Right. Went to
Okay.
Barry right away. And then my senior year, I just stuck with Barry. Mainly because the guy that played alto was kind of a jerk and I didn't want to be like him. um, the reasons we do things, I mean, this is a long time ago, but yeah, I had a teacher that taught trombone at the time, and he encouraged me to play Barry. You're going to get more gigs if you play Barry, and I played it, and I really, I got used to putting a lot of air through it and that whole thing, and so yeah, and then I went to community college at Santa Barbara City College, had a good music program for a community college, and then I went to CSUN and was a jazz major there at Cal State Northridge.
Got it.
So having the Barry thing was helpful. I got into the A band fairly early on because I played Barry, so that was helpful. But once I was there and I started to do a lot of small group things, and since it was in Los Angeles and I was starting to play outside at school a lot, and then realizing Barry's cool, Barry's really cool, but I don't know that I can just only do that. So that's when I sort of started adding things more, and then over time I think like a lot of people I oriented towards tenor, particularly because of probably mostly because I just feel like it's the most diverse as far as styles, and and then plus the transposition is so much easier. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's true.
I don't
That's
know how
true.
many of us care to admit that's why, but I will. That's one of the reasons.
It's also lighter than a Barry to carry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think about that a lot. Our Barry player Andy, he's maybe an inch taller, but yeah, a Barry all the time is it's a commitment for sure.
It definitely is. Cool. So let me ask you this question. So you had a really great experience with high school jazz band and stuff. Did you have any private teachers, during high school or anything like that? Or
I
did
had a
you?
couple here and there,
Okay.
yeah, mostly to just like teach reading, and that trombone player's name's Gar Crawley. He had a whole method of improv that he was teaching that was all kind of handwritten on Xeroxes, and so we did that. I had a series of lessons, but I didn't really stick to things very well at that point. Um, I don't know. I think at that age, you just do things for a little while, but yeah. But that kind of got me going, and then at City College, I had another saxophone teacher, David Telegian, that was a local guy in Santa Barbara, and he taught me some lessons that kind of got me ready to go to Cal State Northridge. But early on, I was very much a ear player, and that was something I just kind of knew pretty early on that I kind of have a knack for this, and I think that's part of the reason that I discovered music so fully, is that I just, wow, this is something I'm actually pretty good at. So up to that point, I did sports and all those things, and that really wasn't my bag. So it was a kind of nice discovery. So I had a good year. And in high school, we weren't the kind of school that read a lot of tunes. So when I got to college, it was a real awakening to realize, like, man, you got to get your reading together.
Oh, well, this is interesting though, because
Yeah,
this is really interesting because usually it's in high school, a lot of high schools it's reading, 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 and at the, I can't think of the word, but it really does not benefit your ears so much unless, you're
right,
able to do transcriptions and stuff. Yeah. So in college, you're saying reading, reading, reading for the big bands and that kind of thing, right?
right, right.
Okay.
And that was, I mean, to this day, I feel like that's, not an Achilles heel, but it's like certain things I'm better at others. And the reading thing has always been a little bit more difficult than just the improvising thing for me. But Isaac Jenkins, his program was great because we would do festivals and we do the sight thing and sight reading thing, and we were never great at that, but he really was good at getting us to know how to swing and swing well and really understand the concept of it. So we would take a chart. We did a lot of Ellington tunes at that time. So we were taking these tunes and really kind of digging into them, like, okay, every bar, how do we really make this feel right? So, you know, it was a lot about feel. And he was really open to letting us combine things too, which I don't think did well when we competed, because the tunes kind of had a schizophrenic vibe to them. But if, you know, we had a song that he allowed us to do like a ska feel in. It's sort of like, so it was very open. He was very open to like what we wanted to do, and like kind of encouraging that. But long story short, like I really felt like I got out of there, and I really felt how music felt in a really like great way, not in a academic way, but in a really, in like, you know, had to experienced it and really, you know, knew how I wanted things to sound and feel.
I think that alone, in all honesty, reading, I think anybody can do, and anybody can improvise. There's no question about that. But
Right.
when it comes to feeling, you know, feeling the groove, feeling the rhythms and all that kind of stuff, that takes some time, you know, and that takes guidance and stuff. And to
Yeah.
have that, yeah. And most people are so bent on, you know, reading charts, reading, that, you know, the kids are just so focused on reading notes, they're not really feeling it. And they're not even listening to songs either. They're not even listening to the charts that they're playing. You know what I mean? They're just reading notes.
Yeah. And it becomes, you know, it becomes an academic thing. And then you sort of forget, you know, you're busy in that tree view, you're forgetting the forest view. And he was really great about like, okay, we have this crescendo here. Instead of just crescendoing, how quiet do we get before that? You know, all those little details we go, and, you know, if you didn't have a bunch of pencil marks on your chart, like you weren't doing it right. You know, it was like, we're really going to dig into this and figure out what are all the things. And as a group, you know, as just a bunch of high school kids, like we really, felt like there was a lot of, you know, tightness because of that, because we'd spent the time to, and then that later on, you know, through the career, it's like, all right, like, you know, paying attention to those sort of things, playing in ensembles, like how to blend, all, you know, all those things were sort of, you know, I got a good idea about pretty early on.
In fact, you know what? That was going to be my next question. I was going to ask you your experience with Isaac's band. You know, how did that help you when it comes to being in Voodoo Daddy, you know, and other things that you've done?
Yeah, I mean, actually, if I think about it, there was quite a few things. He was really big on just like life lessons, and, you know, one of the things would be like, you know, if you show up for a job interview, you're going to play in a band or whatever, you're going to do these things, you're on stage, you got to look sharp. You know, it was a big thing, and he did it in such a way that he was very sharp a dresser, you know, and everyone, you know, wanted to be like him, and so we were, you know, everyone was open ears at that point, like, oh yeah, no, we got our uniforms, we got to look sharp. And as a jazz band, we had like kind of a different look than all the bands. He found these cool outfits from a place he had custom made, and anyway, he had a lot of style, and so that, you know, obviously Voodoo Daddy like has a you know, we dress up in suits. Sometimes they're vintage. We're doing more like current looks now, but yeah, just having that thing, and sort of realizing when you're on stage that you're performing, and that how you look is important, how you entertain, how you connect with people on stage is important.
And you feel like you got all of that from Isaac?
A lot, yeah, for sure.
That's so
Yeah.
interesting. That's kind of like the modern day. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's like the modern day equivalent in a sense of branding when you think about it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because, you know, I think, not to jump ahead, but I think one of the big things with Voodoo Daddy that's made it successful, and you know, is that we kind of approached it as like, yes, we're in a rock and roll world. You know, we came out in 1993. The biggest band at the time was Nirvana, right? And here we're playing swing music. So we sort of like just accepted that, you know, like we're in this world. We can't, you know, there were quite a number of bands that had different kind of vibes about them. Some of them were very retro. You know, none of us are, you know, have retro cars, or, you know, we respect the music, and that's really what it's been about. But the performance aspect. So when I say we're in a rock and roll world, like, you know, when I would think of big bands, like particularly when I was in high school, my impression was like, you know, a bunch of older people. They have the fiberglass stands. You know, we're going to do number, you know, 375. Everyone pulls their music out, and someone stands up. Maybe there's a mic, maybe there's not. I mean, it's just it's a different vibe. And not to take away from any of that, because that's really the history of what we do. But our approach was like, okay, we're going to have wireless mics. We're going to run to the front of the stage. We're going to embrace the audience. As a soloist, that's been a thing that's been interesting for me to work through, is to be able to try at least to look at people when I play solos. For some reason, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like the gears turn, and the gears for engaging with someone slows down the gears for inventing solos. So it's always been a weird dichotomy to do those things. But yeah, it's always been about performing and looking like we're having fun. And frankly, we do. I mean, that's one of the secrets of us, is that, we've done this together with the same people for so long that it is really fun. And anyway.
No, for sure. And I've seen you guys, and I've been there, and you are absolutely having fun.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of, I mean, it's the same. Well, we started as an 8-piece when I started, and then we had a trombone player that was with us for a year or two, and things kind of didn't work out. But then we've been a 7-piece, and we've been the same 7 people now. Like, the band's going to be 30 in April.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty amazing that, you see a lot of bands that have been around a long time, but to have a band that big and have essentially all the same people there is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and this is really cool. And let me ask you this question: it is all the same people for the most part since the beginning?
Yeah, the 7 partners at the beginning, it's all the same. So we were 7. We've added a couple people. We've been a 9-piece now for probably 15 years. But of the core original 7, it's the same people from the first record. Yeah.
That is incredible. Oh my gosh. And since we're talking about Voodoo Daddy, how did you get started with that? Was it an idea you had? Like, can you talk about the beginnings of
Yeah,
of
no,
show?
absolutely. So when I got to Cal State Northridge, I was in a combo right away with a trumpet player named Glenn Marhefka. And we were at school, we did stuff together, and then he graduated a little bit before me. We're the same age, but he just had his act together a little more than I did. But yeah, he was doing this other gig, and at that point, before I joined the band, it's funny, I was doing 14 different things, 14 different projects at that point. And some of them only were like once a month or once every other month. So, but I was busy doing a lot of different things. And one of them was a punk band, and I was in this punk band that had a horn section. We played in Hollywood. And then afterwards, the trombone player, who's also a CSUN guy, said, "Hey, Glenn's playing at the Derby. We should go check it out." Okay, so I went, and I hadn't heard of the band at that point. I just saw him play, and I sat in, and I met the guys, and they liked how I sounded, and it was kind of a cool hang, and didn't think much of it. And then a couple of months went by, and I got a call, and they said they were going to do a game show. We did this game show called The Big Deal, and it was on Fox, and this would have been 96.
Wow.
And they had this big budget for this game show, and they wanted a house band, so they hired us. They had a dance troupe that was called the Pussycat Dolls that no one had heard of at that point. They became a whole thing. But yeah, basically they hired me because they said, yeah, Andy, he's been with us a long time. He's the baritone saxophone player, and for a while he was doing all the solos. But they said, he's really, we don't know that he'll be able to do these solos just right off the bat. When you do a TV show, they're going to say, "Hey, we need a song. We're giving away a jet ski. Make a jet ski song." Okay, rock jam and F sharp go. Like, he kind of wasn't the guy for that. So they hired me to do that show because they'd seen me at the Derby, and so that's how I started playing with them. And then about a month later, they said, "Why don't you come and do the band?" So that was August of '96.
That is cool. And
Yeah.
let me unpack that for a second. So, for the listeners that are curious about this, all right, rock jam and F sharp, go. What and thinking back, or even thinking like a beginner would, or something to that effect. what were some of the things that, going through your mind, like how would you approach that solo, and especially giving away a jet ski, you know what I mean? Like, how would you, you know what I'm saying? Because I know
What
this
makes
because
a jet ski appropriate? Yeah.
yeah,
Um, I don't know. I mean, it's funny. Like, I mean, we all start to play, and we don't really know what our path is going to be, and I didn't really. I mean, if someone had told me a few years later, like, yeah, you're going to have this whole career based off of being in a swing band, I would have said, you're crazy. Like, that's not what I was working towards. But yeah, I mean, at that point, I was, I'm still am. My guys were Michael Brecker, Lenny Pickett, David Sanborn. I mean, I really liked those kind of players. I was really into R&B. I'd done some touring with that sort of thing, and so being in a situation like that where it's like just a rock groove or whatever, like I felt like that was kind of in my wheelhouse. And really, the swing thing was not, and so I had to go back and do my homework. I mean, I'd done some study of that, but to really get the right feel, and I had to do a lot of transcription and go back and do the reviewing of what had been there. But I felt like really in my heart that other kind of direction was where I was, more apt to be. So in those things, like I'd done a lot of rock gigs. So yeah, I mean, on a game show, okay, there's a rock song. It's going to be for 30 seconds. It's going to go into commercial break. What do you do? Well, immediately altissimo, probably, like pentatonic based with some fills and funky rhythms and, that sort of thing. It's just, that would seem like the appropriate, honestly, I don't think I really thought much. It was just like, go, and then I just do what I did. But yeah. Yeah, so that was a good experience because we got to do a lot of different styles, which was good.
And under pressure too, and I had done something for a show that was supposed to be on Nat Geo, and it was the same thing, like these snippets that you would record, you'd get ready for, and it's like, okay, we got to have the feel of, it was like a cooking show, so we're gonna introduce like salads or something like that.
Yeah, play something salad like, okay.
Just makes me laugh when you think about it. But these are the kind of directions that you get.
No, absolutely. And it was funny too, because, you would sit there all day, we'd be lying down, taking a nap. And then all of a sudden someone would say, band, go. We need, they would think of it the last second. And of course they needed it like that minute. So yeah, I mean, that was really like, okay, pick a key, pick a style. Okay, go. So it was good training. And it was just fun, like it was the first like real television I'd done on a saxophone. And so it was, all those things we had great guests, like Little Richard was a guest, so I got to meet some people through it too, which was cool. But yeah, it was funny because I'd been doing all these different projects, and then all of a sudden I was doing this TV show, and then like a month later I'm in the band. And so like almost immediately it was like I was just unavailable, and even at that point the band was working quite a bit. So once I got kind of locked into doing the gigs they were doing, it was like, it was pretty encompassing, and I would get phone calls, and I was just always, every weekend I was busy. So that sort of changed what I was doing pretty quickly.
It focused you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, actually, two questions I'm going to ask, and I'm sure Voodoo Daddy is probably the only thing that you're doing right now. I'm assuming, because you guys are working a lot.
I do some other things. I'm in the house band at our local jazz club up here, the Grape, in Ventura, which is
okay.
a very cool club. If you been there yet, they've been open about a year, and they're doing some really cool things. And I do that. I have a project called Mfaka, which is an South African dialect. It means cat, but that's a band I did, and it's all odd meter stuff. So that's a whole other side of me that I feel is like really kind of what gets me going. Big for me was, like I'd mentioned that Frank Zappa record. That was huge for me to start out with. So I've always been into odd meter things like Don Ellis and Mahavishnu Orchestra. I was really into Rush when I was in high school. I really liked prog and like odd meter stuff. So it's kind of funny. I don't really get to use any of that in Voodoo Daddy. So, but I've had this other project that I did. The guitar player actually died last year, so we're not doing anything now. But
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, wow.
yeah, but yeah, it was really like I really felt like this is the stuff that I really like to dig down into. But anyway,
Is that
yeah. So
gonna resume?
I don't think so.
Interesting.
I don't
Okay.
know if we can do it without the guitar player,
Hmm.
but yeah, it was cool because for a long time with Voodoo Daddy, like we just worked so much, like you said, that I wasn't doing a lot of other things. I lived in LA for quite a bit of that time. I was there for 16, 17 years total. And then finally I figured, well, I'm only going to the airport and doing a handful of gigs. Maybe I could live somewhere else. So I moved up here to Ojai. And we're about an hour and a half north. So, there's things that need, if there's gigs down there, I can do those. But yeah, I mean, for a long time, I wasn't doing other things. I wasn't playing a whole lot of jazz. So now I'm in the house band. It's the Tuesday night jam thing. I'm back to like learning tunes again and getting into it. And it's just been amazing, like to like be able to step in that and have that sort of influence to kind of keep me on my toes.
That brings up another question too, because being in, one type of performing situation for over a decade, right? Long time when you think about it.
Almost three, yeah.
Yeah, almost three. And so, there's the propensity to possibly go stale, to get burned out, that kind of thing. Like you think of Broadway musicians and stuff playing the same book, 8 shows a week for years and years. It's a great paying gig, so that's why people, keep it. But you could really that can drive some people crazy. So how did you keep yourself, interested, not going insane, during that time?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the January of 2019, we played our 3,000th gig.
Wow.
And, most of I would say 99% of those gigs probably contain like the same half dozen hits that we, play because those are our hits, right? So I figure, Go Daddy O, You, Me and the Ball Makes Three, Jumpin' Jack. I mean, all those Mambo Swing, a lot of those tunes we've literally played thousands and thousands of times. So the fact that, from the very beginning, the approach was like, well, Karl could improvise, so you just do what you do. So, I've always had the opportunity to kind of approach things differently every time. Now, that being said, like, you play the same solo and the same song at the same tempo and the same key and all that, like, for the thousandth time, you sort of run out of, inspiration, but what I try to do is, I try to play something somewhat different every time. I mean, there are certain licks and certain songs that I know like work really well, and sometimes I'll throw those in, sometimes I don't. But a lot of times it's like, okay, what I'm thinking about before the solo is like, okay, well, sometimes I start on this, sometimes I start on that. Well, maybe I'll start on a different part of the chord that I haven't in a while. Maybe I'll maybe this time I'm going to try to use a lot of space. Maybe this time I'm going to, spend a lot of time in altissimo. Maybe I'm just going to do like a standard, like swing kind of honking style on something, if that's appropriate for that particular tune. I'm just always thinking like, what can I do different? And I think over time, if you took like 500 solos to listen to them, you'd say, well, these kind of all are similar. I mean, I'm not reinventing the wheel by any stretch for every solo, but each time I approach it, I just go, what's something I can do that's different? And it doesn't always work. Like if I had like the perfect solo, that would probably be better in some situations to connect with the audience because it would be like a really well-formed thing. But yeah, I would go crazy. Like if I had to do that every single time, I would, it certainly wouldn't be as fun. And some guys in the band, like, like our Josh Levy, our piano player, is an amazing improviser. So he could play something amazing every single time. And he sort of chooses to like, well, this is what people know, so I'm going to do that. So, it's kind of like what our personal choice is. And so I sort of feel guilty that I'm the one that why don't I just do what the people want? But part of it's just for my own, I guess you could say, selfish reasons, but it makes it fun.
Yeah, but this brings up a really, really important point though, because you have the famous solo, the famous recorded solo, so to speak. And
Right.
then, the conundrum, do you, every time that you play on a gig and that song is called, do you do that recorded solo? A lot of people, always ask this question, and I've always asked myself that question, when I was first starting out. Oh, well, I thought they want to hear the sax solo that they've heard for years on the record, so I can't play anything else because
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But then as you start to play more, you start to get bored doing that. This is just coming from me, but I know other people
Right.
relate. And then you do your own thing. But that's still an issue though. And so you're giving us your perspective on that. But then when you mention the piano player, he's of the thinking that, you're giving the audience what they want.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, if this is an excuse that I can, I so when we recorded that record, I mean, Josh and I are the same age, so maybe the excuse doesn't work for him. But I was 27, so I would like to think I'm 51 now. I'd like to think I've gotten better since then. And I listen to those solos that are on the record, and honestly, I don't like most of them for different reasons. Sometimes it's how something resolves, or I anyway, I mean, I could go into why I don't like each one, but it's not pertinent. But yeah, I mean, to me, it's like I'm always trying to like stretch out, do something different. It's interesting that we're talking about this because Scotty Morris, our band leader and songwriter, we did a session. Gosh, it's probably been about 12 or 15 years ago, where we re-recorded all our tunes with the idea that we're gonna re-record these, and then when someone asks us for a recording for like a sync, for like a movie trailer or a commercial or something, we're gonna give them this version. And a lot of bands will do this because when you do your first record, you're on the major label, they own all that, right? So the idea was like, we're going to re-record this. We had this guy, Elliot Scheiner, is a really famous engineer. He offered to help us out with this thing. So we did this recording. We've been sitting on it now for, like I said, like a while, like waiting to mix it. And so finally, Scott was like, all right, we finally do this. And up until now, for the last 10 or 15 years, he was like, yeah, Karl, you need to relearn all those old solos so you can make it sound like just like the record. So I transcribed my solo, which was bunch of different solos, which was humbling to say the least. And then lately he's kind of had a whole sea change of like, yeah, well, you know what? Like, I don't think it matters that it's the same solo. Why don't you do new solos? So for the last like month or two, I've sort of been like going back and like saying, okay, now that I have the opportunity to really make the solo that I want, what would that be? So in that process, it's been pretty interesting. I've looked at things and sort of reanalyzed. We play on stage. We don't have charts. We memorize everything. So, I'm going back, looking at the changes exactly as they are, and deciding like, like in Jumpin' Jack, we get to a couple of the 5 chords. I've always altered those chords. I've either played diminished or I played some kind of altered dominant thing to try to create more tension, more dissonance. And then, after all this time, I thought, why don't I just play the regular 5 chord? And I tried that for a little bit. No, it needs that. It needs that dissonance. I like it better that way. So it's cool. It's like reacquainting, readdressing, like coming back to those things. And after all this time, hopefully a little bit wiser, like what would my choices be now? And then just to be doing this in 2023, and when I have digital, all the benefits of that, back to when we first recorded our first 2 records were onto a 2-inch tape. So you got like 3 or 4 passes and that was it. So it's interesting that to have had one foot into that time and era of recording, and then to be where we are now.
That is really interesting. Wow. Oh my gosh. Let me ask you though something. So you guys are doing this project, which is great. You're re-recording, you're thinking about, you're approaching these solos in a different way. When you re-record them, are you going to be going into that recording with just like ideas of how you may improvise, or are you going to, like have worked out a solo, and that's the solo that.
I don't know yet.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know yet. That's what I'm kind of trying to discover. It's funny. I mean, I've sat down at home and started recording things, and I've done the time where you go, okay, I'm going to put in every super hard lick and try to like make this thing the ultimate, and then you listen to it back and you go, this has no flow at all. It just sounds like a bunch of licks. And I'll do the other where you do the complete opposite, and then there's a lot of inspiration, and then every once in a while there's something that doesn't fit or whatever. So like trying to combine those things, I think what I'm going to do is maybe a little bit of both. Maybe have something that I know works really well in a spot, but then kind of play around that. I know it'll probably depend on the solo, but yeah.
I think it's also because of what it's for. Like it's for a record.
Exactly.
So like for a record, I mean, okay, yeah, we could talk about Miles Davis and, Coltrane, all those guys, and go into a recording session, they just did it, you know what I mean? But
yeah,
but when it comes to like, nowadays it's so much different. I think it's just so much different. And going into a record, and the mindset is, okay, this is going to be a record, this is going to be something that's out there. I wanted to make it as, I don't want to use the word polished, but I will, for lack of a better word. You want it to be the best it could possibly be. So
right.
It's this kind of thinking that goes on. Do I want to just totally improvise it? But what if I don't like it? I don't want to have 12,000 takes, piss everybody off, get exhausted. Or do I want to like kind of have some ideas and think of a general flow? Or for some people, they just kind of worked out something that sounds really good. It's interesting.
I think in the past, like I had a general idea of certain things that I wanted to do, but I didn't really know what it was going to be. And then typically, like, yeah, I would get like 4 or 5 passes, and then usually 1 was the best, 2 was pretty great, 3 was interesting, 4 was starting to be a little disjointed, 5 maybe a little more disjointed, because now I'm really trying to start putting other ideas in, and it's not quite, that. So, I mean, typically the one or two were the ones that were the ones. But yeah, I mean, in a way, it was almost a blessing to not be able to overthink it.
Yeah. Yeah, the pressure of that, when you think about it. And I know when I've recorded, like usually the first take was the best one, and then it would go downhill from there, because then I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute, I've got to make it sound just as good as that one. Gosh, I hope that they really got a great recording out of that first one. And then I'm playing track 5, take 5, and it's like, and then it starts to get in your head. It's this whole mental game. And I remember with one producer I was working with, and this guy was so awesome, but he's like, he kept saying, okay, let's do it again. Go. Do it again. Go. And I didn't get a chance to breathe. I'm like, hold on, let me take a breath. He's like, listen, no. What we want to do, it's, we just want you to just go for it. Just, don't think so much.
Yeah.
And it's not like, you're going to have the perfect solo in one shot. We're going to just mix and match.
To cut it together. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't, that was interesting. I can understand
kind of
that.
like that's kind of the go-to way to do it now, which is funny because I mean, I remember we did that with one solo on the first record. It was Jumpin' Jack, and I had a whole chorus that was good, but there was one section that it was like, I don't like that. And then of course they went to the other tracks, and sure enough, there was another one that right in that section was something cool. So okay, let's get it, get the razor blades out, got the tape out, cut it, did the taping thing, the whole, and just to see that happen in Capitol Records was like pretty amazing to watch that go down. But it was a thing, you had to commit to it. Like, okay, this is what we're doing. If you don't like it when we're done, tough luck. That's however it splices is what it's going to be.
Yes. And of course we know Urgent, that solo, of course was a splice type of thing too, so it makes you feel better, knowing that, but it's definitely a mindset flip, because, in my brain, I'm always thinking, okay, this is this take, and let me just do the best that I can. Oh, all right, got to do another take. I got to make that the best, but I'm not thinking about, splicing together this section or or this little phrase or that little phrase. It's just, the word automated comes to mind, as opposed to just going out and just jamming,
It does. It really creates a different mindset, because, if you're punching something, let's say you have a solo and there's like maybe 2 bars that you want to change. Like, you're not in that moment anymore. Like in the moment that you're doing it, it's like you're surfing, or skateboarding, whatever the analogy is, and you got your flow going, and things happen and you adjust to it. But yeah, like when all of a sudden you cut something out and then you have to just jump right in and like be having that same vibe and that same mindset that you were in that moment that you got there. It's pretty hard to like, I mean, I don't think it's hard to put something in there, but to like have it feel as natural sometimes is difficult,
Yeah, oh my gosh, I totally agree with that. And what's really cool too for the listeners. So you're hearing, I like to get in the mindset of people, when they're thinking about improvising or soloing or performing or whatever. And this is something that we have not really talked about in all, over 160 episodes in this show, so it's really kind of fascinating when you think about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think because a lot of times when we think about improvisation, we're just thinking about, beginning and ending. We're not really thinking about chopping stuff up. And, and a lot of recording that people do, especially nowadays, because we can, that's a big thing. And I'm like you were saying, you've done sessions. I've done sessions too, where they're like, oh, you did 6 great takes. Cool, man. I'll just put something together. And you're like, well, okay, I guess that's cool, but what if I don't like what you put together? Then, and then you sort of lose that choice and that control over it, which, I mean, I guess if you're working for someone else, that's what happens. But, sometimes you craft something you really like, or they'll go with a take that you didn't like at all. It's like all those things happen.
All the above, yeah. But it's all good. It's all good, for sure. And so let me now go into, I wanted to address that other question I was going to ask before. So, you were on that TV show for a little bit and, like rock solo and F sharp go. That was awesome. That felt like home base. But then for you had to revisit, like playing swing style in the feel. So can you talk about what that journey was like for you? Who did you revisit? Who did you transcribe? What would you recommend for people who, want to be in big bands, community bands and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think my first go-to was Ben Webster, just for the sound and the breathiness and the how he phrased things, where he played on the horn. One thing I noticed about Ben is that he hardly plays palm keys. He's like always in the body of the horn. I had a mentor that helped us a lot in the early days, Tom Peterson. And he turned me on to Lockjaw Davis. He was like, man, I don't know. There's something about how you're playing that reminds me of Lockjaw Davis. So then I went in a deep dive on that, kind of get an idea what, this really kind of powerful, aggressive kind of playing, which I feel like I can play that like that. I, a lot of time with that. I did a lot of Dexter early on. So, some of that, because really what we're doing is some of the stuff we do is maybe if you were to put an ear on it would be like mid-20s to maybe late 60s. We're kind of covering all those different spots. So, I'm trying to sound, we did a whole record called Louie, which was Louis Prima, Louis Jordan, and Louis Armstrong. And so I had a bunch of Sam Butera stuff to do. So then that was a whole other deep dive to like, okay, that is Sam's sound is so specific and so like melodic and perfect. And there isn't a note that's like not supposed to be there, absolutely supposed to be there. So yeah, doing those things. So on that record, I think it was the last one we've done. Yeah, that was the last record. So yeah, it was one of those situations where like we were sort of putting off. We weren't sure when we were going to get to record it. We hadn't really started doing the arrangements yet. And then I get a call from Scott, our band leader. He was like, yeah, we're going to do this in 2 weeks. There's 11 songs you have solos on, so get to it. So in that situation, it was daunting. And, listening to all the records now, I think it's the one I'm probably the least proud of because I just didn't, I didn't really get the time to do what I felt. I don't think I played bad, but it didn't quite have the preparation as some of the other ones. But that was one of those situations where it was like, okay, everyone knows Sam Butera's solo on this. Like I have to address that. I can't just play something else. I can't.
Okay.
So then it was like a decision making process of like, okay, well, how much Sam should I do? Should I start the solo like exactly how he did? We did like Jump Jive and Wail. You can't start Jump Jive and Wail not, you have to address what it is because it's like one of the greatest solos of all time. So yeah, trying to make those decisions. A lot of times we were doing them in different keys. Like Jump Jive and Wail's normally I think B flat, and we were doing it in D.
Oh,
Just kind
okay.
of like interesting keys. Trying to figure out like how do I do that Sam thing when there's certain parts of keys that are endemic to like B flat. You get that side B flat. You can like pull out a lot of tricks to make that sound interesting. E is, and it's got its own kind of vibe, but different. So like trying to figure that out, and then, but yeah, like really the hardest thing was like how much, like how, like feeling comfortable with how much of myself that I put in there, that it doesn't seem like some kind of arrogant thing, that I'm actually like, paying tribute, and then maybe just adding a little bit of my own, but not too much, like trying to figure out how to straddle that dilemma.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad we had the conversation before because this fits perfectly into this situation.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But yeah, I've done a lot of transcription. A lot of it is just, getting into like how does someone end a phrase? Are they, in what era? Like Dexter. If I'm playing a Dexter thing, he might add a little bit of vibrato at the end of a lick, but not much, because that was in the 60s. We were doing a little less vibrato. If I'm doing like a Coleman Hawkins thing, like definitely that's a different vibe of how you end a note, like how you play a melody, and like kind of the harmonic cool things that he did, and like how do I tap into that, and then taking all of that and then saying how does that apply to this band that's playing swing music, but really it's like we're not no one is trying to do this like 100% authentic like it's in the 40s. Like we're doing it, but we're kind of doing our own take on it. So like figuring out what feels right in that situation as well.
Yeah, so it's not an actual like tribute band per se. It's like tribute with a twist.
Right. Yeah, and it's original. We have a lot of original tunes that are written in the style of, and then we did a whole Cab Calloway record, so those obviously are all covers. Um, and it's interesting. Like at the beginning, it was more originals and it was more kind of jump blues. And then as time has moved on, we've sort of done different projects to try to broaden what we do. And each project has been really great I remember the Cab one, especially, you just have the band grow and do different things and play different styles, and then it's that constant dilemma from an arrangement standpoint. Josh Levy's our piano player. He does the arrangements.
Okay.
But then you're taking like the Cab tunes, you got a full 17-piece big band. How do we make that translate? So a lot of times when we record, we'll do like a 17-piece thing or maybe slightly smaller, but obviously we can't do that live,
Right.
just financially it doesn't make any sense. So, our core thing is to take all those arrangements and then say like, well, what is, how can we do this with 5 horns? So a lot of times, I'm playing trumpet parts, I'm playing trombone parts, trombones and trumpets, they're playing sax part. I mean, we're all kind of like making these things happen so that the harmonies, but one result is that we play a lot.
Oh yeah.
Like just like horns on the face during a show, like we just play a lot. So it's interesting, and then like realizing your role, like listening to those arrangements and say, okay, well, this is originally a trumpet or a trombone. Like, how do I play that sounds, appropriate to that instrument? So it's been interesting to like, we're a big band, but we're a little big band, right? So we have, I might as well talk about what we have. We have Barry. I play alto, tenor, clarinet, and soprano. And then we have 2 trumpets and a bone. So like trying to cover all the harmonies, and in a way it's a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more, we don't have the luxury of giving everyone a crazy extension, So Josh is really good at making the chords like real hip to like kind of include what the extensions of a chord are, but we don't quite have the voices to give everyone, unique voicings.
Yeah, okay, so there's a bunch of ways I want to go with this. I want to address this part. Maybe sometimes you would have a 17-piece big band for a recording, but not
Right.
obviously for a live show. So I want to get into some of the questions that listeners have with regard to you're playing in a horn section, right? You're playing the saxophone section. Okay, so roles. Can you talk about the roles for each person in the saxophone section and the rules of etiquette, so to speak, when it
Yeah.
comes to that?
Um, I feel like I'm just parroting what I was told because I haven't done a whole lot of like section playing over the year. I mean, when we record, we do, and depending on what horn I'm playing, since I play alto and tenor, I kind of when we record, I have my choice. Do I want to play lead? Do I want to play tenor? Usually, I just play tenor because that's what I feel my voice is. Um, but yeah, I mean, from lead, obviously, like everyone needs to listen to how a lead player phrases, listen to what their volume is. If you're playing louder, this is kind of big band 101, but you're not playing louder than the lead alto player. I'm under the opinion that the Barry player should play loudish, depending on the part, right? Like I want to hear the blend. I want to hear a lot of Barry. I want to hear a lot of alto, lead alto. Um, and then if you're playing like second alto or you're playing first or second tenor, you're playing a lot of thirds and sevenths. You're playing like kind of the real crunchy, cool notes that make the chord of the chord. So some of that needs to come out, but in a way, a lot of times, if you listen to a tenor part, it's always going to be all over the place, because from an arranging standpoint, you're kind of filling in uh, how a melody line goes, and depending on how they harmonize it, you're going to have a lot of these strange intervals. So it's in those chairs, it's important to like listen and say, okay, well, how important is this note? And how does this fit in the chord? I don't know that I do a whole like theoretical analysis. Oh, I'm playing the third now, but sometimes like if you're playing a moving line, fine. I don't think too much about it, but if you start to play a chord, you can kind of tell what you're playing. Is this an extension? Is this like a fifth? Is this what is it and how important is it? And then playing volume wise accordingly to what fills the chord out. The same thing applies when we play with a 5-piece. It's the same thing. It's just instead of 5 saxes, it's 5 horns. And it's been interesting over the years. We've played in ear now with in-ear monitors for 15 years, and that's a whole other thing. Is to try to blend in that situation because you're not really hearing what's really going on. So a lot of that is really like thinking about these things beforehand, because a lot of times you won't be able to, depending on your mix, you won't be able to listen to exactly how you guys blend. You'll have to, sort of anticipate what certain things are going to sound like. And for me as a tenor player, there's certain notes that, like if I have my mid E, like I just know like, okay, this note screams, it just does. Like, it's usually louder, it just is. So there's certain notes of the horn that I know, like, okay, if I'm blending, I gotta be careful of these particular ranges. But yeah, I like a lot of Barry. And I think in those other positions, you're really just doing a lot of listening to see like what is appropriate for your particular part of the chord.
But the Barry player still has to listen to the lead alto for entrances,
Oh, absolutely.
ends of phrases.
Phrasing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then the lead alto is gonna be your guide for like how long does he hold vibrato? How wide is the vibrato? Like if you're playing a 30s tune, your vibrato is going to be way wider than it is if you're playing like a late 50s or early 60s tune, right? So like what is appropriate? How wide is it? How fast is it? It's funny because when we were recording Tom Peterson, the one I was telling you about, he played in the Tonight Show band. He's an amazing musician. It's a big mentor. He was the arranger for the first record before Josh. He kind of took Josh under his wing and showed our piano player, and Josh has kind of taken the reins since then. But I remember like being in the recording sessions and doing like 30s tunes and me wanting to play real fast, wide vibrato. And Tom was like, oh, I don't like that, because he was of that generation. Like Tom's, I think it's early 70s now. But to him, like he grew up in the 60s where like it wasn't hip to play fast vibrato, wide vibrato. So him, it was like, oh, like, really, do you want to do this? And I'm like, yeah. Like this tune's from the 30s. It has that frenetic kind of, like with that wide vibrato, it just has this weary buzzing kind of energy to it. So, we made some choices like that. Do we want to do this? Do we don't? Like, and so, like trying to think, some of the tunes we did were more like a Nelson Riddle kind of later 50s, 60s vibe. That has a different thing. So like making those choices, but it was just funny that like generationally, he was just, his first reaction was like, I don't want to do that. That's not it,
Yeah,
But in
yeah,
the 30s it was, right? So
yeah. It's the authenticity of
yeah.
that type of moment, and that particular song.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like I said, I don't know that we do a lot of that, but I mean, it's definitely a consideration. Like, how did they play this, and why does it sound that way? Well, maybe we should do some of that.
Yeah, for sure. And let me ask you. So you talked about the Cab Calloway project, right? What were some other notable projects that you've done? With this kind of level. Well, everything's a level of thinking, but what were some other notable projects?
Um, so that we've done of the kind of cover records, those are the two that we've done. The rest of them have been original records, but each original record has like something that's, say, in a Sinatra big band style, or like a Nelson Riddle kind of an arrangement. Some tunes are kind of more on the like kind of birding bebop big band style, and trying to get us to fit that. One of the interesting things about the band is that the horn players, the three original are Glenn Marhefka, myself, and Andy O'Reilly. Andy O'Reilly was self-taught. He plays baritone. And so, at least for Glenn and I, and for Josh, our piano player, we all went to music school. We did that whole thing. So we had that background. The rhythm section, they were all in punk bands. That was their evolution, is they played in punk bands. Scotty, our singer, was a big part of the kind of Oxnard hardcore scene of the 80s. We used to call it Nardcore. So that was their approach. So when we rehearse things, it's always interesting, styles of rehearsing, or we'd spend a lot of time studying jazz. So when we do like something new, like a big fast bebop thing for the rhythm section, it's like, oh wow, okay, this is a whole new thing. So every record's kind of a learning experience. And they're getting their feet wet. How do we stay really tight and together when we're at 230 or 250, whatever the tempo is, so yeah, each of these projects, songs, or if it's like we've done a lot of like movie soundtracks or trailers, over the years, how to adapt to that. At one point we did this 2 or 3 times. So we were the house band for Carson Daly when he had a show. And it was funny, we took it real serious, and like every guest, we were like, okay, this guest was in that movie. How can we, how does the song apply to that? We were real serious about it. So, and then it was great to just be on the spot and say, okay, now we're doing like this rock thing, or now we're doing this like spaghetti Western type vibe, or whatever it was, like to try to adapt to that. So, it's fun as a band to do that, particularly when, normally we're just touring and doing our own thing. So any opportunity that we have to like stretch, it's just always like super welcome.
What was it like communicating? I know for myself, also going to music school and that kind of thing, we kind of have our own language because we
Yeah.
were formally trained, but then when you're communicating with other people in a band who didn't go to music school, which is perfectly fine, they learned by ear, they learned in different ways or whatever. You ever find that there's like sometimes a disconnect in terms of language, or maybe not now, but maybe in the past, when you're first like starting out, like you'd call something, you'd call something a certain thing and they'd call it something else, or you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah, no, I think that's always been an element. And it's been something that we work through, but I also look at it as a benefit, because I think like a lot of people that went to music school, I used to call them super jazzers. I still do, but like, people that are just, I only listen to straight ahead, which is great. I mean, if that's your gig, it's great. I mean, I love that. I love all that music. But that was kind of where I was at, not totally, but but you go to school, you're sort of, I don't use the word indoctrinated because that sounds bad, but you're in this situation where you're hearing certain kinds of music. So when I got to play with them, it was like, oh, now I get to explore like all the music that I used to listen to before I got super serious about music, So like I remember Glenn, our trumpet player, he hadn't listened to a lot of Zeppelin. Oh man, really? Oh, you got to listen to this and that. And so like as a band, it was always, their foot was in a certain thing, you know, oh, you haven't checked out Black Flag and you haven't checked out, Jane's Addiction or whatever. And so we were always like trading music when, you actually had to trade a physical thing. But it was interesting how like those different influences kind of like built us all together. We put something together. And so when it comes to on the bandstand and discussing about things, yeah, sometimes it feels like we're speaking two different languages. But the one thing about this band that's if someone said, Karl, what do you think is the what's the one secret of your success, if there could be one, right? But I think for us is that when they started the band, the whole idea was like, okay, we're in Ventura, California. We're an hour and a half or an hour north of LA. We really could get anyone to be in this band. Like if we're working enough, we can get a lot of people. But are these people that are coming into the band, are they a good hang? Do I want to be with this person? So from the very beginning, that was like that was priority one. And I think it's one of the biggest reasons why we're still doing it is because we, it's a family. We're all like brothers, there's a lot of us. So, I think sometimes if you're in a band, it's a trio or a quartet, maybe the dynamics are different because there's less people. With 7 or 9 of us now, it's, if someone's being a jerk, like we let them know, everyone lets them know in a nice, like, constructive way, but you can't really get away from it with anything because there's so many of us. So yeah, like the priority being like we want these people that we want to hang out with and be with. We're still the same after all these years, so that's a huge part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just answered a question I was going to ask you, how to keep that together. Especially, we all have our moments, let's face it, and, if someone's having a moment, how
We've all had those moments.
I'll deal with it. That's really good.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the other thing is that, Scotty is a great songwriter. He's a great band leader. He's like really the A personality. He feels comfortable in front of people. He feels comfortable, talking to the audience and doing all those things and kind of doing all the business stuff. And the rest of us are really kind of B personalities. We're just, all of us are stoked to do what we do. None of us really feel like we need more limelight or, it's never a battle for those kind of things. So that particular chemistry has helped a lot as well. And then I think the last thing is that we've been a partnership. So I am a partner in the band as a horn player. So that's rare. Let's face it, that's rare a lot of times in band. So the 3 of us that were the original horn players were in the band. And so all the decisions are made in that sort of democratic kind of fashion. So, like we have skin in the game, and we always have. So, and it helps us to make decisions, about keeping things lean, going on the road, like, we do certain things that help us make more money. We room together, we have roommates, we do that. Some bands, oh, I can't believe you guys do that. That's terrible. But we know each other so well. It's like, that's what we do. You do the numbers at the end of the month. Do you want to make X or X plus, $2,000? Okay, I'll do X plus $2,000 because that's more money for, So like being that sort of democratic band, it's and then the other thing is like we never had like like we had one platinum record, we did really well, but we didn't, we're not Foo Fighters, we're not, we never made that kind of money. So it wasn't ever that position where someone was like, I don't have to do this anymore. That being said, we all want to do it. We don't have to do it, but like, it's just, everyone's like, everyone's on the same page. So when I think of your listeners and people like maybe starting out, like, how do you get a band together? A lot of that is important because if you're on the same page, if you have one person that's like wants to take all the credit and the publishing and the whatever it is, and you don't want to share that makes it harder. It makes it harder to last and to have happy members. And then the other thing at the beginning is just figuring out like I think this might be the biggest thing of starting a band in the beginning is like, how are you into it more than I'm into it? Am I into it more than you? Like getting everyone on the same page, like how dedicated are you to this? Luckily for me, when I joined, they had a lot going on. There was a lot of gigs. So, I just sort of like jumped on board. And it's funny, I finished at CSUN in 96 in June. And then by August I was, so it's been an amazing ride. It's like, I just was sort of walked right into this situation. And now it's, this August will be 28 years for me. So it's been pretty interesting. I've been super fortunate to have, been in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you mentioned so many really important things, and you mentioned this a while ago. Like when the band first formed, they said to themselves, "Do I want to hang with this person? Is this someone that I want to be around?" And asking those questions in the beginning prevents so many problems later on. And then just realizing the personalities and who is the person that wants the spotlight, who is the person that's the A-type personality who's, going to be, super, super organized and wants to take charge, who wants, I don't want to call it a follower, but who wants to, just enjoy what they're doing and just do their job really well. It's recognizing those kinds of personalities. I think that's really super important.
And that kind of reminds me too of just like sharing the responsibilities too. So we all, Scott is really the one that makes like the main decisions, but we share. For a long time we did our own like social media, even though before that was the thing. But in the beginning days it was just like printing out cards and sending out flyers, how we did it back in the dark ages. But like websites, merch, we have and a lot of times these jobs over 30 years of like, okay, I'm tired of doing this. Will you do it? Okay, well, we'll sort of switch around the roles. And, maybe it's artwork. Maybe it's, Andy, our Barry player, he's a really great graphic artist. So he's worked on a lot of posters and things. So we've always tried to keep things in house, not only financially, but just to keep it ours, and when we first got the first record deal, I remember the tendency is to, you get these people, they'll pay them, they'll do all this stuff for you. We tried that for a while, and we found that we just like it better when we're more in charge of things. Yeah, and it was, I don't know, I keep segueing, but it was interesting because we put our first record out. First record went platinum. It was right in the swing was really big in the summer of '98. Squirrel Nut Zippers had a big hit. Cherry Papa Daddies had a big hit. Royal Crown Review. It was all this kind of, we sort of all independently were kind of getting into this music. And all of a sudden this scene sort of like gathered everyone up and created the thing. And up until that point, we're playing a lot of rock clubs. Because that's what you did, rock clubs, radio festivals. And then after that first record and after the summer of swing, they call it, like it got real rough because a lot of the venues honestly were kind of bummed because they would book gigs and dancers would come and dancers would want water. When you're dancing, you're working out the whole show. So you didn't want to drink a lot. So the venues kind of were pretty disappointed with the whole scene fairly quickly because they realized from our bar standpoint, we're not making any money. So at that point, we did our second major label record. And then after that, we sort of split. We went on to do kind of a more indie label thing. And then also at that point, we switched and we tried to do performing arts centers. That was like a big step for us to like kind of take one foot out of this, put it in another thing. And I think one of the reasons that, of all those bands that's still doing it, we're kind of the ones that have been there the entire time. I think a big part of it was like kind of making realizing those points where it was time to pivot,
That was smart. Actually, that was a smart time to pivot. That's actually really great really great advice when it comes to that. And when you said it was like a really rough patch, so but you were still able to find enough gigs.
We were finding gigs, but we wanted to do, we did a few performing arts centers, and then, you go from the rock club and it smells and there's beer and whatever other things spilled, and you do that thing. It's fun, and I actually miss some of those shows from just how, intimate you were with the audience. Like a lot of times they're right near you. There's that whole energy that I miss. But you go to the performing arts center and it's like, oh, I have my own dressing room.
Yeah.
Oh, there's like this huge, like, catered meal, and like, maybe we should try to do this a little more.
Yeah.
So like pretty early on, we're like, this is kind of what we see ourselves doing. Right around that same time, we did a gig for the Air Force, their orchestra in Washington, D.C. And part of the deal for the show is that they can't pay you, but they said, we'll do all the arrangements for you. You just come in and you play what you do, and then you'll have this whole orchestral background behind you. So we did that, and then we did some other arrangements on our own through some people, and then we had a whole orchestral show that we did for a while, and that was great because then we could kind of come into these performing art. Oh, Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. Oh, I kind of like that. Maybe we'll hire them again later. So that was kind of get our foot in the door in some of those spots. So yeah, we've always like tried to do different things, experimental things, see how it works, and I think we're not doing too many of those these days, but we played with, I want to say like 35, 36 different regional orchestras in the United States. So
oh, wow.
That was pretty fun. Yeah.
And it's different too. And it's also bringing you in front of a different audience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And just to feel like the different worlds, like when you're in a band that's in the, I'll just say rock scene or popular or whatever it is, it's a different, everyone's in the band. You may have demands or not, but you're kind of just your own entity. You don't, you're doing your own thing. And then you get to the orchestral gigs and it's just a different world. The union thing, the rehearsals, like, okay, the rehearsal's got to be this long. If it's 5 minutes more, then we got to have a 5-minute thing for everyone. It didn't happen on our gig, but I remember a trumpet player overheard him talking to another guy, like, yeah, they held us over last night for 5 minutes. Oh, what did you do? Oh, I just gathered up my stuff and walked off stage like 5 minutes early. And I get that. Like, I'm pro-union, like all that. I get it. It's just a different world than what we do. It seems a little, I mean, if I were in that situation, I don't know if I would do that, but I get it. Like, it's their time. They want to be respected in that. But it's just funny, like when we put what we are, this like kind of self, we're always in our kind of our own bubble, and to be in those situations. But I felt like the shows went well, and the audiences certainly liked it a lot. And I can't speak for the orchestra. I mean, the people that I talked to seemed to like it. So
yeah, no, for sure. Oh my gosh, all right, I have a bunch of questions here. So, with regard to you have to be a member of the union though because of the places that you play. Yes.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, there are, you need those protections. There's no question about that. Those people that don't know
For
this,
certain
like,
things, the union is great. For us,
yeah,
it's always been kind of like, well, I pay the dues. I don't know that. I mean, again, those gigs we can get in there. But if you're a band touring, it's kind of not applicable to what we do for the most part. There's probably been a couple times where something's happened financially or whatever, and we were able to say, the union says this, but I could probably count that on a couple fingers. I don't think it's really happened that often.
So wait, so when you're touring and stuff, don't you need to be part of the union because those are probably union venues and stuff like that?
It depends on the venue. Yeah. I mean, we all are. And so
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I think it's important for that. But yeah, I mean, the day to day, it's not something I think about or have a lot of interaction with.
Sure. Yeah. And, I know personally, I remember going to college as an undergrad. I remember some of my friends saying, oh, yeah, you got to join the union, because, union gigs. But then we're also saying, even at this, and this was late 80s, early 90s, even at that time, obviously not everything was a union gig. And,
Yeah.
You had to weigh paying the dues. And at that time, though, it was still looked upon like if you took a non-union gig, you could get penalized,
Right.
and it was a bad thing. But it's such a different the union is important, but it's mainly seen as vital for people that are playing television shows, films,
Right.
Broadway, orchestras, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and in the early days that we were doing a lot of, the movie sessions, obviously that was, we couldn't do it without that. That was important. Over time, um, I mean, at a certain time, like we had a lot of cachet. People came to us a lot to do those things. Over time, we've sort of done our own thing, and those, we still do some, but not as much as we used to. So we don't see that as much. But yeah, I mean, certainly, some of the guys are still SAG members because certain things we did, we had to, we run a Scooby-Doo episode once where we all had to talk, that sort of thing. We got to be, so those guys got to be in the union.
That's cool.
Yeah, it
And
was pretty cool.
what this leads to too, and this was another question I had before. We're talking about how you get a band together, and one of the questions would be like, you'd ask each other, whatever, how dedicated are you to this, right? And it, just shows how dedicated you all are keeping this group together for so long. But the interesting thing, though, with how dedicated, you were very lucky to enter this band where you had a lot of things lined up. I
Yeah,
know myself, I'm in a bunch of bands, and
yeah,
it's really hard to, find people that aren't, oh my God, what's the hired guns, so to speak.
right.
Like I'm a hired gun, although I'm in
I
a
mean,
bunch
that's
of bands.
a huge percentage of all our gigs, right? Is that like it's like what we do is kind of the exception that it's like,
Yeah, it is the exception, and it's in some ways it's a shame that it's the exception. Well, people, they when you're a hired gun, you're all hired guns. You sound great together. There's no question about that. But
yeah,
you do miss that extra level, I think, of tightness, of being tight. And I equate this to sports. And being originally from New York, I was a Mets fan, and I just remember the '86 Mets. They won the World Series not because they had the greatest players on the planet, but they were united as a team. You felt that, and not any, many of the teams that whether they win, the World Series or the Super Bowl or whatever, there's that extra element in there,
yeah,
of that closeness and stuff like that. And I think it leads to, the dedication and the family effect that you guys created.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. We've been fortunate in so many ways. Just the fact that it's been the same guys all these years is huge. And people come and see us. Oh, you guys are so tight, and we're always. I don't know. I think we just always shrug it off. Like, of course we are. We played 3,000 gigs. Like, we kind of live and breathe this music together, and for good or bad, in my opinion, sometimes bad. But like, we'll do tempos where we drag, we rush, we do all this stuff together. We've done it so many times together. Sometimes we have to readdress it. Like, hey, let's get a metronome and listen to this because we've done this so much. No one even thinks about it. It's been to the point where I'll take apart maybe a tune that I haven't played in a long time. I'll go home and I'll start practicing with the metronome. I go, oh my gosh, we pull and push this all the time because all of a sudden I want to pull and push this in a certain way that, of course, the metronome's not letting me do.
Right.
So it's it's a blessing that we've all, it's pretty, as a horn player, it's demanding in that we, like I said, we're just horns in our face pretty much the entire show. But what's not demanding is that feeling of comfort. Sometimes someone will get sick or, whatever reason we have a death in the family, whatever. Someone comes in and then it's real excited. Oh, this is a new person. They're going to play this things differently. And then all of a sudden everyone's kind of on their best game and a little bit more excited and listening. But then there's the other side of like, well, let's say it's a drummer or a piano player, like they're going to put something in a different spot, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, like this isn't how this is supposed to go, because we're so used to it being a certain way. So it works both ways. It's good and bad, but mostly it means that we're tight, and we don't do a lot of rehearsing anymore.
I was going to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we do a Christmas tour every year, and for years we would get together, and the last couple we were just like, yeah, we know these tunes, we can do this. So, there's a comfort level because we just do it a lot. For the last, I don't know, for a long time. In the early days, it was probably a bit more, but I'd say for the last 20, like we've done at least 130 shows a year. So, I mean, we're playing. We don't go on tours that are like, we leave June 1st and we're getting back, September, whatever. Like we do a lot of weekends. So it's not, we don't, I think the most we've ever had off besides COVID, of course, was maybe 3 weeks.
Okay.
So like we're always like back into it. So really, there'll be a tune maybe we haven't played in a couple of years, and it'll be wobbly for a day or so. But I mean, everything always comes back just because of that, like you said, like just cohesion of being the same people and playing it and just doing it, not having a different 2 or 3 people in every time. Because I mean, everyone wants to approach something in a different way, and just coming to grips with how, like particularly we have a lead trumpet player that comes in and subs. That's always a little bit like, oh, wait a minute, because we're always like, however they put it is how we want to do it.
Yeah. And if you're not having the rehearsals, and so let me ask you this question then, how do you keep it fresh? You talked about some of the projects that you all have done and stuff like that, and that kept it fresh with, different styles of music and stuff. But how are you keeping it fresh? How many new tunes are you learning per year?
Um, it depends on the year and whether we have something coming up. We're working on a new record right now. It's interesting because I mean, it seemed like we were on this kind of path of every like 3, 4, 5 years we put out a new record. And then over the last, I'd say maybe 8 or 10 years, like that whole method of doing it has changed, because now making a record is really, it's just an expense. So, you know, because we can't make any money off the records, and because everything is streaming, like that changed the whole calculus of it. But it's interesting because we've always been a band that, like, our main thing was playing live. Our money maker has never been mostly record sales, right? So I remember when this all started changing, a lot of the like rap acts or some R&B things, like they would put out tracks and they would do limited touring, but they still had made a good living. Now you can't really do that. So yeah, for the last 10 or so years, it's like, well, we want to make new music, we want to do this, but we've just decided we have like a 2 or 3 year plan we've just been discussing, but it's about releasing singles. Release a single, maybe the budget of it, we can just do 2 or 3 songs at a time. And then hopefully in a year or two we'll release that as a record. But that way you're sort of getting like people excited on social media about new things happening, because you spend all this money and records are expensive, and particularly with a horn band. If you can sort of defer those costs over a period of time, and you're keeping everyone interested in these new songs, as opposed to like, okay, here's a whole record of tunes, and then everyone listens to it a lot for a month or two, and then but it was interesting because through venues, it seemed that you always wanted to have some new product back in the day. Like the more you had to make records to have that. Well, what are you doing lately? And now it's really more about how many Instagram hits do you have, how many followers do you have. It's the calculation has changed. So we're still making records because that's what we want to do. That's what we love to do. And investing time in new things. We've done a number of tunes over the years that we try and somehow it doesn't work out. So, there's a lot of those. Sometimes we brush those up and put them out. But yeah, it's the calculus has definitely changed as far as like needing to put a record out and what that means. So that's sort of changed like how often we've been doing it.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's a shame because I just think about attention spans, and back in the 80s and 90s, an album would come out,
Yeah.
and you'd look forward to that album. And, the band would play off of that album, tour off of that album for 1 to 2 years, and that's what was accepted. And now, yeah, it's totally changed around with streaming and yeah, the switch over to releasing a single here, a single there. It just reminds me of how our attention spans have just gotten worse and worse, how it's almost like we can't even deal with an album anymore. It's sad. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, how we listen is different. I mean, I've caught myself doing it too, is, if back in the day, if I bought a record, I'm going to listen to every track. I bought that, right? Like I
Yeah.
invested this money. So now, maybe the first track is usually, one of your more palatable ones, maybe. Maybe there's a track 2 or 3, skip over. I don't, this intro doesn't interest me, whatever, you just skip over. But you would listen to a thing, and then there's the fact that it was a record, you'd turn it over and you do. I mean, it was like a whole process that you did, and like you would not listen to those songs that maybe aren't, the hits right away. And when we would tour, it's like, we would tour, we put a new record out, ones that we thought were the hits, we'd play those. And then after a bit of time, well, let's start putting some of the other tracks in, some of the other ones that, and they always got a good response. And I don't know that that's changed. I haven't really done an anecdotal survey of that, but I imagine it's different now. You may have songs that people just don't know about because that whole process of listening is different now.
Yeah, yeah. It's just crazy stuff. But you know what I wanted to ask you? I'm going to actually do 2 more questions. So you mentioned that you guys are doing a new project for the most part, new album coming out. So can you give more information about that? Like, is it going to be out this year or?
I think it's probably going to be late 2024. I would think at the pace we're going, yeah.
Okay, late 2024, but you are pretty much packed with shows.
Yeah. I mean, I'd say post-COVID, we're like 85% of pre-COVID as far as like how much we're working.
Wow.
It's
Okay.
good.
Okay, no, that is good, but it's I was going to ask you, like, what did you personally do during COVID? How did you, world stops, touring stops, I mean, what did you do?
A lot.
You
I did
practiced
a lot of practicing.
Okay.
And man, like the first time I could come out and actually play with another human being, I was just like, I was so ecstatic, like after playing my iReal, tracks, doing slower downer, like trying to get grooves and put them in different key, all those different things. I'm playing, but I'm not playing with other people. So just to come back and actually, particularly jazz, where there's like a back and forth, like it was really, it was like the clouds parted and a big sunlight ray came through. But yeah, a lot of practice. We did a couple of those parking lot gigs,
Okay.
where people pulled up in their car and then they played the tunes through the radio. And I actually liked that. I thought they were pretty fun.
Yeah.
Kind of bizarre, we always do Minnie the Moocher. And I remember we did Minnie the Moocher. And there's the part where howdy, 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 hi, audience does it. Howdy, 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 ho, right?
Oh.
So we did that part. But instead of singing, howdy, 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 beep, 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 beep. Yeah. So we got through it. We did a tour. We did like a 8-day thing in Florida at that time because it was kind of the only place we were able to do that. But yeah, for the most part, we didn't play for, that entire time.
And what was it like coming back? Like you guys you had to have rehearsed because,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. We had one rehearsal. I was pretty amazed at how tight things were, to be honest. My expectations were like, man, this is going to be like terrible. And everything kind of just like fell back into, 3,000 shows. I mean, maybe all that's just ingrained, but all the same thing I was talking about, like, this part does this. And then the next part has this little slight, slower tempo, and like all those things just locked in, just naturally, really.
That's cool. No, that's really good. So now, before we go, how can people reach you? How can they reach Voodoo Daddy? And give us your socials.
Okay. BBVD, Big Bad Voodoo Daddy.com is the band website. I'm KarlHunterMusic.com. And I have a Facebook music page like most of us do. Karl Hunter music page. I do Instagram. I'm Swing Swang Swunk, separated by underscores. Swing, sort of vintage music. I like funk. I don't know. I kind of put it all together. That's cool. Yeah, I think that's it for socials. I'm not, I'm an average social media user, I think, for someone my age, but I'm not, crazy into it.
Yeah, me too. I like looking at it, but I'm not crazy at posting or anything like that.
Yeah, it's funny. I know that's a big important thing to do now, and I've been trying to do my due diligence and post more things. Um, but yeah, I mean, again, it's like things have changed. Before you didn't have to do that; you could just play saxophone, and now you got to like know how to record yourself and know how to do social media, and like there's a whole other list now.
Yeah, it's a
Luckily,
whole.
I like techie things, so I think I'm all right. I'm doing all right, but
That's good. And we, I can't even imagine. I mean, who would have thought back 20 years ago, looking and thinking like all the stuff that's out now? Can you imagine 20 years from now? I can't even imagine what would come out.
uh, I'm imagining just what AI is going to do. I mean, it just
Yeah.
seems like a month, like just the articles coming about that. Um, I mean, I know that hasn't really gotten into the music thing, but like, write me a song that's, Hall and Oates meets Prince meets whatever, and all of a sudden it puts out a song. I mean,
Uh,
and I think
yeah.
I think it seems as terrible for us as that how artists are feeling about it now. It's, and in a way, I think it's going to be a great tool if you use it like a tool. Like, I kind of want to write something. Maybe this will give you some ideas, and then you take that and like, you know, humanize it. We'll see, but yeah, I know it's kind of scary to imagine what could happen.
Yeah, and I guess 20 years ago we would have been scared to think about the effects of social media, or the profound effect that social media has had, has on society and stuff like that. We wouldn't have imagined that, and now we're living in that now, so
Yeah, it
yeah,
seems so great and wonderful at the beginning. It's before it's sort of the dark side crept into it.
yeah,
No one
yeah.
knew what was going to happen. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. It's just interesting how things come to pass. But the cool thing though is that, the stability of Voodoo Daddy, and that's really cool. And that's something definitely to be celebrated. Hopefully you guys are doing, celebratory tours and stuff like that, right? And you're building that up.
there's really not a week that goes by that I just don't, kind of marvel that, being in the right time at the right place. Um, you know, I just seemed like everything fell together and in such a positive way. And the fact that we're still doing it, what one last anecdote, because but yeah, all my friends would ask me in the early days, like, "Hey man, you're doing this Voodoo Daddy thing. What do you think, man? Swing music, no one's doing that. What's going to happen?" And I kind of told my guy, "I don't know. I give it like 5, 6 years, maybe. I don't know." That's what I expected, and it's turned into this whole career. So I don't know what the moral of that story is, but
No, but it's you know what it
live
is?
your dreams and it'll happen. Like,
Yeah,
I
it's taking
guess,
the
yeah,
chance. It's taking the chance. Taking the chance and taking the risks and yeah, being in the right place at the right time. And you mentioned, everybody kind of has their role in the group,
right,
to make things move forward. And because, everybody gets along, it's like a family. It's not like everything's like 100% peachy, all the time, but
no, of
it's
course
a
not,
family,
yeah,
and you ask the questions, would I want to hang out with this person? And essentially, yes, that's what
yeah,
helps. And that's what makes things more
absolutely.
stable.
You think of how many days we're on the road, how much time we spend. It's there. We're with each other almost as much as we're with our own families, and yeah, yeah. It's, and the thing with us is we're always like I was talking about, uh, like figuring out the right time to kind of change tack. Like where are we going now? We've just always been really good at that, and trying to reinvent. Um, whether it's technology or the industry or whatever. We just never stop. Like, there's just never been a point. We've just always gigged. Like I said, before COVID, we didn't take more than 3 weeks off. So it was just always just one foot after the other. We just always kept going, and that's been a huge part of it as well.
And I bet you after COVID, it rejuvenated you guys, you know?
Oh, absolutely. We
Yeah,
were so
yeah,
grateful when we came back. Oh
yeah,
my gosh, we get to play music again. This is amazing. I think we're still, COVID was great in a lot of ways because it made everyone grateful and permanently grateful. Like, I haven't felt like we were here and we've come back. I mean, everyone's like, these people come and see us play, and we make music, and this is how we make a living. Are you kidding me? This is great.
yeah. Definitely changed perspective for sure.
Yeah,
Cool. Well, listen, Karl, this was so much fun. This is awesome.
Yeah, no
Thank you for
kidding.
being here.
Yeah, this is great. I've been following the podcast for a long time, and it's cool. You're doing great things, and there's not one that happens that I don't learn something. So yeah, I really appreciate what you're doing with all this.
No, thank you. And you know what? I say the same thing all the time. I truly mean this. Every single one I learned something from. And, when I'm done, I have chills. I'm like, oh man, that was so good. And it's just so inspiring. So, and now you're a part of history. You're part of it.
That's awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you so much again.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.